Welcome to episode 4 of Your Wealth Playbook. We've got a special guest on, Blake, a boy from Westy, who is got an interesting story that Jared and I wanted to bring on. We've been talking about a guest for the first couple of episodes, a couple of client stories, but Blake, I think, is from an education point of view, which is what we're after and what this podcast is after. We really wanted to bring him on, educate the mass, because we think he's got a great message. He's also a great bloke. Country fella, Westy, we won't hold that against him. Family man, children, and a key message that I like when we have conversations, mate, is you just want to help people, which aligns with everything that I want to do. But Blake, welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Well, Blake, can you give us a quick intro? Tell us a bit about who you are, what you do, where you're based, and why you're doing it.
Yeah, so kid from Westy, born and raised here in Newey, based up in Cessnock at the moment. Dad of 2 boys, 7-year-old, 5-year-old. So that's pretty much it. Yeah, nothing over the top. Pretty stock standard.
Very stock standard. 7 and a 5-year-old at the moment. Any more on the horizon?
No comment. not in the plans.
Yeah, a boy growing up in Newcastle, mate. Working at the moment. We'll probably dig right into your story, but out of school, what did you want to do?
I didn't really know, actually. It was sort of one of those things where I'd done my Year 10 certificate, went back to Year 11, done a term, and just wasn't for me. So ended up going and working for my grandfather, doing refrigeration and air conditioning. Yeah, so done my trade doing that. Got out of that, went and done some other stuff, and yeah, now driving coalies as a 9 to 5 or night shift, day shift, whatever you want to call it, yeah.
Very good. So you're a Friggy by trade?
Yep.
Lovely. And then you said you mentioned that you're is it a coalie? Is that the term that you used?
Yeah, coal train driver, yeah.
A train driver.
Yep.
Interesting. And long story short, how many properties do you own at the moment?
About 10.
10 properties.
Yep.
As a train driver.
Yep.
Just a simple Aussie bloke that's accumulated some great assets along the way.
Yep.
Very good. Nice. That Jared, tell me a little bit more. You've been working with Blake for a little while. Know more a little bit around Blake. But the journey starting together with you both. How long ago was that? How long have you known Blake for?
Probably 3 years now. So Blake came on board in the first year of business and thought would be the perfect guest for today. Blake covers off on what we want to look at with Your Wealth Playbook in terms of helping people create wealth for themselves, for them families, the growth mind aspect that Blake's got, and that's something that we're certainly going to tap into about his why and what keeps him going, what doesn't keep him, why is he not stagnant, why is he not happy where he is, what lights that fire once you get past 2 or 3 investment properties, because it's a very, very small percentage of Australians that own any more than 5 investment properties. So how do you keep going? How do you keep growing? How do you pivot? Now, as a Friggy and a Coley, what sparks the interest in property from there? Because I imagine at that point in time, you know, you've been investing for 10 years now. A lot of your mates are probably more interested in partying, traveling. What helps you at that point in time knuckle down and say, look, I want to buy a property and I want to build a portfolio?
It's actually a really good question. So it's actually sort of hard to answer. So I actually didn't know what I wanted to do. So obviously worked hard, worked as much as I could, always said yes, sort of, was somewhat of a decent saver. Didn't sort of waste me cash on random stuff and whatnot. So ended up finding myself after a few years, had a fair chunk of money in the bank and just didn't know what to do with it. So shares never really made sense. My grandfather, he owned a couple of properties and whatnot over time and all that sort of thing. And whenever he spoke about how it all worked and the whole, you buy one, over time it appreciates in value, that's money. And then even if you want to, sort of force that equity, spend some more money on it, do a reno, and then if you want the cash, sell it, there's money, or you hold on to it for a long term and there's an income. So that sort of made sense to me, and not such from a mentor perspective, but the whole theory of how the sort of real estate aspect worked sort of resonated with me, and that's why I sort of just went down that path, and yeah, I thought that was sort of, it just made sense to me to do it, so that's why I went that way.
Did he guide you in terms of locations or type of properties, or just from a high level was speaking from investing and investing in multiple properties?
Yeah, so not as such from an area perspective or anything like that. You know, all his sort of ones that he had were sort of local, out westy way back in the day when no one wanted to be there. So, and not even about the accumulation. That sort of just come from me and just not wanting to sort of sit around and, you know, wait. I guess I knew no one was coming to help me. You know, my parents are work ethic, you know, but straight up Aussie people, Aussie battlers, and I knew I wasn't getting a handout. So if I wanted to lead a good life, I just figured I had to do it my way. So
he just said get land and bricks and mortar, and you then tailored it to what you wanted to do over a long period of time.
yeah, pretty much just made sense. You know, if my phone dies in, you know, your shares, then you don't have shares. Doesn't happen with a house.
Yep.
Live a good life. You mentioned there. What does a good life look like for you?
I think it's just having the ability to do what I want to do and when I want to do it. Like, money means different things to different people. You know, I still wear clothes from high school. Like, it's clothes, good cars. Like, they don't really interest me. It's, yeah, more the freedom and the comfort to do what I want to do when I want to do it. You know, take my kids places, Vietnam, you know, things like that. So that's more what it's about for me, yeah.
Now, Blake, can you remember your very first investment, what it was? What did you learn from that experience? And what did that teach you about the next one?
So my first one was, like we just figured out, 2016. So, you know, a few years ago now, come to think of it. But yeah, so it was just an owner occupied at the time. 3-on-1 out in Cessnock, had a sunroom and an office. A really nice owner occ home. Still live there at the moment. I haven't spent much on it. I think I've spent 10 grand on it over the years, over the 10 years. And it's doubled in value, more than doubled in value, which is really good. But my first my first investment was one in Neath that you love talking about. Spent 195,000, 1,012 square metre block, had a shitbox house on it, you know, she was run down. Subdivided it, so yeah, spent 25 grand on the front house, spent 35 grand subdividing it, built a duplex, so then turned that 1 into 3 investments, and yeah, all up, I think I'm 799,000, you know, in front on that one. So I think what it taught me is just that, you know, if you put your money in the right places, it'll do wonders for you. Like, there's proofs in the pudding. So yeah.
1 into 3 is pretty interesting. If someone's looking to get an investment property, usually it's just they'll either go and get a house or a unit, something that they live close by. They don't look for the worst property. You said, you know, there's a shitbox house for 195 grand on a big block. How did you get to a point where you go, I'm going to subdivide this, spend a bit of money on it, and turn it into a 3 into a 1, or 1 into 3?
So it was just that sort of, I looked at land size that had rear lane access. I'd done my DD on it, so I knew that where the sewer was located, so I knew that the sewer was going to be easy access, stormwater was in the rear lane, and also, you know, through the DD found that the actual land behind it has already been pre-lotted for subdivision, so they'll do that eventually. But the whole 1 into 3, it just made sense based on land size and where the services were. So it just, yeah, made sense from that sort of aspect. And at that price point, even at that point in time, it was still a bargain. Like, you know, land that size, you just don't see it very often, especially with the rear lane.
Rear lane access, 1,000 squares. How old were you when you bought that?
I'd have been 22, 21. Yeah, probably 21.
21-year-old. How do you come up with looking for a property in Australia that's 1,000 squares with rear lane access, where the sewer and the stormwater's at the back of the property? Where does that education come from?
I actually don't know.
Because that's not something every 21-year-old is looking at or for when they're looking, especially if they're looking for property. But in general, it's not something that you would generally look for.
No, I think it's something that I've sort of I found I've been decent at is the ability to adapt to what's in front of me in that regard. So obviously the property was great based on land size. I knew I could get a tenant in there after spending a certain amount of money, but having that ability to, or the potential, I should say, is probably the better word, to actually do the subdivision at some point made sense. That's why you want to buy a property, for the potential of what it's got one way or another, whether it's through renovation or, force your equity one way or another. So yeah, there was no real education behind it. It just sort of made sense to me that, if I buy this, it'll do what I want it to do in the near form. But down the track, if I want to expand, I've got the ability and the opportunity to do that. So yeah, that was sort of the decision making behind it.
Force the equity is something that you've talked about a couple of times here. Can you expand a little bit around force on the equity? Because I think generally if someone's looking to get into property, it's a waiting game for them. They'll go and wait for the equity to increase. Generally happens over a time period, 7 to 10 years as the saying goes. Force the equity. Tell me more.
So force and equity, multiple different ways to do it. Subdivision is one that I've sort of adopted and sort of run with these days, or developments. Sweat equity, renovation, that's a really big one, big common one that people use. And, like you said, you can let your property sit for 7 years, 10 years and just let the cycle in the market and time do its thing. Or you can sort of push it along a bit, give it some paint, a Dulux overhaul, freshen up, that sort of thing. And you really force that equity and push it along. So, rather than sit on your hands and waiting, just push the point.
With that, you've got probably a couple of options there as well. Like I said, you've got the ability to force the equity and see an uplift in the purchase price or valuation. Also, a secondary benefit that you've got there is that as an investor, you're wanting to see a good rental yield there. So if you can find something that's old, bit dilapidated, you can put some money into kitchen, bathroom, flooring, painting, you can probably see an uplift quite substantial in that rental return. Is that something that you look for in every property that you look at, or are you looking primarily at location and the ability to subdivide, or is it something that it's a bit of both, depending on the clients that you're looking at?
Yeah, so from a personal perspective and a client perspective, I for my clients, we'll touch on that. I won't buy anything for any of my clients that I wouldn't buy for myself. So when it comes to sourcing and looking at property, for me, it's areas is also like it's a big one. I might not want to live there, but someone will. So it's finding those places where people want to live, people want to be, and then a lot of it can come down to price. Everyone's got a price. It's not everyone wants to go out and spend $1 million. So it's finding a property at a good price that makes sense to me, that gives me the potential to do what I want to do to it when I want to do it, whether it's straight away, whether it's in a couple of years' time. So it's quite a few factors that go into it.
Now, are there any key moments that you see or turning points in this investment journey? At this point, you've got two properties you're building on the back of Neath. A lot of people at that point would be pretty happy. Is that a turning point for you that you say, I've got the ability to really leverage my knowledge here, my DD, or for the deal makers at home, due diligence that you've taught yourself over this period of time, which we've already identified is pretty unique. A lot of that is usually sort of taught or passed down, or, if you're in the game in property. So that's pretty special to be able to look at that, identify what you need to do through due diligence at the tender age at 21 and be able to execute on it. A lot of people would be happy to put the cue in the rack at that point. What incentivized you to keep going from there and say, I want to continue to grow?
I think it was more the fact that I seen what it done from a value perspective. So, and value is good and it allows you to expand and grow.
Give us some numbers.
So that Neath one, all up, like I said, we're about 799K up on that one.
Yep.
The first one that I bought, it's doubled now in value.
Yep.
But that Neath one, it's doing 1,390 a week in rent across all three. So that's probably the biggest one to take from that. Like obviously the value is great, and the uplift allows you to expand and keep going where you want to go. But having that rent and that yield, that made me sort of go, okay, well, in theory, nuts and bolts of it, if I paid off all of that, just those three alone, that whole block, I could retire. $1,390 a week, less taxes. You're squared away with 1,100. So I think looking at that and going, okay, well, I've done it. I just keep doing it. I guess rinse and repeat. You know, it's works.
Got a proven model. It works.
Yeah.
Income is great. Once you pay it off, there's $1,100 a week in the hand that you've got now forever. Why not continue to go and do it again in your early 20s and then continue to drive on? So you've learned some key principles, I would imagine. Mistakes along the way when you're going through a DA process.
Shitloads.
Yep. As we all do when you get into an investing journey, you make plenty of mistakes, and it's not through trial and error that you can
Have you got
iron
any
them
to
out.
share?
Have I got any to share? I've got plenty to share. Yeah. My investing journey started out, my first property that I bought, as everyone does, buys where they live. So I did. I'd always wanted to be an investment property. But I went in there, 2 new bathrooms, spent about 30 grand on there. So a bit of sweat equity because I was an electrician at the time. Plenty of mates, builders, plumbers, jip rockers, everything. New driveway, even got the front of the house rendered, so really made it look nice. I had a Queenslander on the back, so there was a little bar out the back that I'd done up, so I thought, how good's this? It's nearly like a little bachelor pad, 4 and 2 new bathrooms. Who wouldn't want to live there? Beautiful big pool, 10-metre swimming pool in the back. Any investment property now that I look, if it's got a swimming pool, it's nearly a hard no for me because they are just a money sink. And even with my place now, my wife wanted to fill our pool in because they are just a way to lose money quickly. So probably did everything wrong, and it was in Singleton. It's accustomed to the mining downturn, so I bought in the peak of the mining boom 2012, sold just before COVID, basically at 2020, so held it for 8 years, and there was about 50 grand capital growth after I'd spent everything in there, and after I had paid for new pool equipment, I don't know how many times over, new pumps, new sand filters, there's a crack in the pool, crack in the drain. So I made every mistake under the sun for the first investment. I didn't have such a nice experience where I wasn't looking to develop a block. I just wanted to get something in where I could put a bit of sweat equity in.
But sorry to dig up old wounds.
Mate, they're not old wounds, mate. It's
You only make those. They're only old wounds because you only make those mistakes once.
Exactly.
Mine's a sewer encasing on my first development, and didn't know that I had to encase the sewer when the driveway was going over it. So that was 30 grand down the drain. But for my clients and I, that's something that they never come across because every time you make a mistake, you learn, and you can help educate along the way. And the more and more you do, the less and less of these mistakes, the more fine tuning there's going to be on those end results. So as each development goes along, you should be able to uptick your profit that little bit more.
Absolutely, and that just comes with, everyone talks about compounding interest, but it's compounding experience as well. And that's what it is, once bitten, twice shy. So, but the biggest thing that I want to address with that scenario, just while we're there,
touch on it as much as you like.
Recorded.
Yeah.
Look where we are now though. So you sold 2020, you held it for 8 years. Had you held it for another 4? What would you have made if you sold it today?
Funnily enough, my accountant sent me a message when he was doing the financials last year, and he said, mate, that property that you held there just sold 2023, mate, for an extra 300 grand. So we've got some capital gains tax to calculate. And I was like, nah, sorry, that's the new owners made all that, not me. So,
but
yeah.
But that's the big takeaway, for me. Like you learn a lot I know this is, generalized chat, but you learn a lot on what not to do and feel like you made mistakes. But a lot of it comes down to that time in the market. Not timing, it's timing in. Had you held it for another 3 or 4 years, you would have been laughing at it. It'd probably be one of the best experiences, one of the best decisions you would have ever made. So
it's funny and something that we talk through. Circumstances change for me in terms of I had a couple of children, forcibly out of the market. Football career ended more sooner than I would have liked to imagine, COVID and all the things. But I know one thing that you love, and you'd spoken about it before, is the cash flow for the property.
Yeah.
And that was really starting to hurt with one wage, no job, back to the bottom base. So I would have loved to have held on to that property,
Yeah.
but I didn't have the opportunity to because I hadn't put the right things in place over the previous 8 years. So it wasn't the right investment for me to hold. It was okay while I was earning great money because it was a little bit negatively geared, but that's not a strategy. And something that I know that you like looking at is that yield to make sure. But if you're looking at a property now, the yield, why is that so important?
Well, just sort of goes in hand with what you just touched on. While the property, it might make money over time, but you've got to be able to carry that debt for the period of the time that you hold it. So investing for me, it's always been about, investing is about making money. Why invest to lose money? You might save a bit of money in tax, but you invest to make it. You don't invest to lose it. And I think that's something that people may or may not understand. But they can get pretty costly properties. You've got to do stuff with your pool, or an aircon breaks down, or you get a blockage in a sewer or something like that, and insurance may or may not cover it. You got to pay for it, and if you're already down, $100 a week on a property, but you've got 3 properties, you're contributing $300 a week, something goes wrong, you've got no buffer, you got to find the cash to do it. Where's it coming from?
It's important. Jared and I were talking about something that we want to have on this is cash buffers save marriages.
Absolutely.
If you've got enough cash available there that if something does go wrong, if there is a new ducted air conditioning system, if there is a new pool pump to go in, if there is a new sewer line that needs to be dug up and put in, if you've got a cash buffer, it saves marriages. One, because it gives the flexibility that you can do it and you don't have to stress about where that $10,000, $15,000 is coming from. 2, in my own experience, the wife likes seeing a little bit of cash in the bank account that she can go and book a holiday anytime she likes because she's got the money to do so.
I think that's why people invest, though. You don't want to invest to be short of cash. You want to invest to be able to go on your holidays when you want to go on them. So, I sort of agree with your missus there, mate. Like, I'm a bit the same.
No, it's important because sometimes you can get right to the brim of where you are, and that only breeds problems if you put up right to the brim. So, cash buffers save marriages. I'm a big proponent of it. Financial stress, getting rid of it. Yes, we want to invest to put money back into our pocket. So the yield is something that you should be looking at, especially when you're looking at rental properties, because things do go wrong.
They do. I think it's something, a lot of people may or may not bury their head in the sand with when it comes to property. You are going to go through phases where you are going to have to fork out. It's not an if, it's a when. And just being prepared for that is a big thing.
Yep. Now, what drives you to continue going on? Sort of touched on a little bit because you've got the knowledge and the know-how, but it's a bit like going to the gym. Everyone knows it's good for you, and not eating the ice cream or the chocolate because that's bad for you. You can continue to derive wealth from doing what you do, but why do you continue to do it?
Well, I think it's one of those things for me where I want the control to be able to live the life that I want to live. Mentioned earlier, and you want to be able to give your kids everything. We're all dads. We're all we all understand why you wake up every day and go to work. Your family, your kids. And the old saying goes that you want to be able to give your kids everything you didn't have. I was really fortunate. I had a pretty good childhood. My parents weren't loaded, but they worked their asses off to give us everything. We never wanted for nothing. So for me, it's been able to give my kids that sort of stuff as well, that sort of childhood and that sort of life, and being able to sort of make memories. And I feel like that's money allows you to do that, but it's that there's no stress for me in that regard. Like everything's covered, everything pays for itself. So it sort of just gives me that stress-free thing to sort of keep going with it, I guess. Yeah.
Stress-free, I love, and also it's a big goal of mine to give the kids more than I had. What does that look like for you and your boys and your family?
don't actually know. Like I said, mate, we had a pretty good childhood, me and my brother. So it's. I think for me, it's just if we want to do stuff, we go and do it. You know, it's not always the overseas holidays and that sort of thing. It's you want to go to the bull riding. All right, let's go to the bull riding. You know, you want to go to Luna Park. All right, let's go to Luna Park. But it's also a fine line because you don't want to raise, spoilt kids. It's a big one for me. I want to raise spoilt kids. So, but no, yeah, I think it's just that sort of ability to be able to give the boys everything I can, and yeah, my nephew. So it's the whole family, not just the two boys. It's everyone, So yeah,
Flexibility and the option that you can do it.
On the topic of not raising spoiled kids, what are 3 things that you want to, teach and really implement to your boys that you wish you had known at their age?
I think the big one is obviously the why you save. So obviously saving is good, but why is it good and what does it allow you to do? You obviously save your money. You go and buy some clothes, or you go and buy a car, or just that understanding the concept of why saving is good would be one. Another one would just be sort of the concept of money. You go to work, you get paid. What can you do with sort of that money? You've got to pay your bills and you've got your obligations, but what else can you do with it? And what it can do for you. I just think the other one would be make sure you pay your bills.
That's a really good one.
Yeah, that's to me. Like you pay your bills because there's 2 things that are guaranteed in life, and that's death and paying taxes. So if you don't pay your taxes, you're going to have to pay more taxes on top of your taxes. So make sure you pay your bills.
Yep. And I love it. It's some key messages for children and looking long, playing short. What do we do with our money now? What does it get us in the future? Delayed gratification, something that we're big on with the education, but also we need to live our life now.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to get to 50, 60, 70 and not lived. We've scrimped and saved and got there. And it's no good being the richest bloke in the cemetery because you can't take it with you.
I've got a good analogy for you in that regard, though. Another footy one that we'll understand, and it goes hand in hand with you look long and you play short, but it's play what's in front of you. It's play eyes up. You've also got to live in the present. So, play what's in front of you. Go and have some fun, but you've also got to remember that life's more than just today or tomorrow. So
If you see an option, go for it.
exactly right.
Playing eyes up. This is going to turn into a rugby league chat, this.
I copped that at a bucket load when I was a kid. Old Sparrow Clifton, get your eyes up, mate. Get your blinkers off. I'm trying, Sparrow. I'm trying.
Sparrow, funny. He was a manager of mine when I was coming through the grades, so I know Sparrow well. Growing up in Westie, for you, playing rugby league, plenty of mates, I've got no doubt. Highlights coming through out of Westie as a young boy, leading into now a Friggy and also a train driver. But take me a little bit around the period of you growing up. Where does your drive come from? Where does that hard work come from? You mentioned that your parents, always worked hard. Your grandfather was a little bit of a guiding light for you as well around investing some money. But where does it come from? Where does Blake get his DNA from?
Yeah, to be honest, I just think that, like I said, my parents, they always worked. They always ripped in. My old man worked, sort of that permanent night shift for 10 years, worked at Steggles, My old girl done the aged care, the disability work, worked 17-hour days. My old man was always, night shift, so they made it work. But I just think that sort of, I don't know, they'd renovated our house, our childhood home, whilst doing all that. So I think it was just sort of that looking around and going, okay, well, this is what you do. You go to work your ass off. You work when you can. You do your bits at home when you can. You do your renovations. And I'm pretty lucky that another analogy that I swear by and I live by. You're a byproduct of the people you surround yourself with. So a lot of my mates, their work is, it's how we grew up. It's Westie. You had a great childhood, but everyone got to the point, everyone worked, it's it's how the community is. You know, they're all some little mining town, so yeah, everyone just sort of ripped in. It's just what you knew. You know, it's all my mates now. They're all the really successful. You know, small businessmen, plumbers, plasterers. You know, one of me best mates, my cousin, he goes and does night shift at Glendale shops plastering. You know, on his own, and then he's got crews that work during the day. So then he'll go and do a couple of hours there. You know, it's just what you do. You know, it's what you know.
Brought into, where you grew up.
Yeah.
Hard-working town.
Yep.
I love it.
Literally.
Do you have any personal habits or mentors or routines that you find that keep you sharp in that aspect from, obviously surrounding yourself with the right people, like you said, but also from an investment point of view that you surround yourself with to continue to level up? Because obviously that's something you've done, significantly since Balmoral and Neath. Who's that been, and how have they sort of supported your continual improvement?
So I think from a routine sort of thing, you mentioned it earlier, going to the gym. I do it every day. It's somewhere I go, back the headphones in. I'll just go into my own little world. I do some of my best thinking in the gym. Whack me country music on or whatever I'm listening to, mostly country, and just go into my own little world. It's my hour a day where zone out. Flick some emails. Do that sort of stuff. So that's probably my biggest routine. But I don't go to the gym to lift bucket loads of weights, and it's more about that mental sort of thing. That repetition, that routine, that just knowing that I'm going there in my own head, getting through my work, sort of either sets me up for the day or just starts my next day off sort of good. So that's probably my biggest routine. I would say.
I love it. Yeah, it's the mental aspect that you get out of going to the gym, and it hits home with Jared's been doing a lot of Stoic philosophy of late, and one of his favourites is Marcus Aurelius. How you do anything is how you do everything. And I think that if you can have that right the way through your life, whatever you're doing in life, it's not we're just on in front of a camera, or you're not just on. You've got to be on, like at work. You've also got to be on when you're at home. And for me, going to the gym is big because it helps with me and my mental capacity, trying to run a business, having 3 kids, trying to have a wife, a successful marriage as well. So making sure that how you do anything is how you do everything is something that Jared's been a big proponent of, and guiding me through that as well with his Stoic philosophy that he's gone down this journey on of late.
Age will do that to you though. I think the biggest thing in that though for me is I'm a big structured person, big on structure. Footy analogy, here we go. It is going to turn into one of those podcasts. I can feel it already for you. But yeah, structure for me is everything, and that sort of, it's something that I try and put into the boys as well, nighttime routine, structures, all that sort of thing. But I find that going to the gym gives me that structure. But it also allows me to, from an investing perspective, structure a lot of my finances as well around that sort of thing. So I pay all my bills weekly, direct debits, those sorts of things. And they're the structured habits that I've just adopted over the years that sort of come from my personal nature into my investing. And that sort of goes with your buffers as well. So I don't, I'm not behind. So it gives me the freedom and that sort of, I'm comfortable to keep going. It gives me that sort of freedom I don't have to worry about anything coming at me.
There's never going to be an annual bill or a quarterly bill that comes out of the woodwork, which would be challenging when you are looking at a leveraged portfolio of multiple, whether that's land rates, whether that's insurance, whether that's water. Like there's going to be significant amounts if they do come out quarterly or annually.
Well, so from an insurance perspective, it's $29,000 a year in insurance, depending on, I think rates are somewhere around that sort of 24 mark, give or take thereabouts. So, if you're looking at paying those off in quarterly installments, you're somewhere in the realm of $10,000 every quarter. It's sort of, if you're negatively geared and you're already fronting $300 a week across 3 properties, plus 10K every quarter, you're in a battle.
Yep. having the structured lifestyle when you've got a leverage portfolio really helps manage cash flow, knowing your numbers. You've got 10 properties now. It's not the easiest because from a borrowing capacity, if you do go and get your first property, the next one, doesn't matter if it's positively geared or not, the lender is still going to take into account, all the costs that we've just spoken about, likely going to reduce your lending capacity. How do you build a portfolio like you have, being no offense, a train driver, is, a Coley? How do you go and build a portfolio like that? Talk us a little bit more around that. What sort of partners, how do you go and do that?
Good question. So for me, it was buying properties to a price. I know that sounds a bit silly to some people, but I didn't really care where I went. I invest with no fear. So the regional places, I've built my whole portfolio in the regions, areas that I know well, that I understand. So for me, it was about price, always bought to a price, and just waited for the right properties at the right price to come. And when they did, just went hard, made sure I got them for the price I wanted. Learned to negotiate. The best way to do it is on the front lines. So I think for me it was just being real strategic around price and really sticking to that. People talk about blue chip assets and blah blah blah. Spending $1 million on one property never made sense to me personally. But I found with that when you buy at a low price, yields are normally pretty decent. So it sort of went hand in hand, which, from a lending perspective, as you'll know, having that sort of a really strong yield, you're $100 in front a week, goes on to your lending, goes to your income, so it helps you to keep going in that regard as well. So yeah, that's probably the biggest thing for me. It sort of allowed me to sort of, keep going and keep growing because it was never costing me money. I was able to then keep saving for all the strip equity into the next one, and I wasn't needing massive deposits because I wasn't buying expensive houses. So I've always paid the 20% deposit, but you look at the Neath, when I bought Neath, 195 grand, 40k. Some of the ones in Gunnedah paid 155 grand, it's like 30k, 32k. So, and even then, your loan amount's only like what, $125. It was renting out for 310 a week or something like that. Like, the numbers speak for themselves.
Yep. 125 grand loan for $300 per week, 15 grand a year. I would say, and I would imagine that probably stacks up in terms of a cash flow that it'd probably fund itself.
Yeah, I think if you broke the numbers right down, from the top of my head, it's probably about 7%.
Yep.
Once you take out, your bits and bobs, I normally chop off 2.5. So you're sitting about that sort of 5.5 mark.
Yep. Chop off 2.5 for expenses.
Yep.
Yep. So when you're talking about a rental yield, if it's 7%, so if it's a $100,000 property, it's paying $7,000 worth of rent, you'll chop off 2% of that, or $2,000 each year for expenses, insurances, all of the things. Obviously, you can a bit of bush mass, a couple of bush boys.
Yep.
You can leverage that up.
You make it work.
Much as you want.
You make it work. You figure it out. But yeah, that's sort of 2.5%, 3%. And I think that's been pretty realistic. And not sort of fudging your figures. Anyone can make figures look good, as you boys know. You see it on social media so much these days. But I think being realistic. 3% on average. Wastage.
Yep. And do you hold all the properties in your own name? Is it you and your partner? What sort of structure have you got going on in your life?
No, so I think it's a big one that you mentioned in your last podcast. So for me, it was I accumulated pretty much most of mine in my personal name. How you get 10 in your personal name is difficult, but obviously buying cheap properties allowed me to do that. But you get to the point where you can't go any further. You can't, no matter how much you earn, you're just stuck. So for me, there was no education when I was a kid about structures either. There was nothing. There was nothing on social media. No one was doing it, so I didn't know. Obviously, as time went on, now I've got company trust structures. Big fella, he's the one to pat on the back for that. It wasn't me, trust me. The amount of money it's cost me to transfer him. yeah, but honestly, without Jared sort of pushed me down that avenue, I probably would have stalled a lot longer. But yeah, so transferred um, 6 or 8, pretty much everything, over into my company and trust structures now. It hasn't been easy. It's been, what, 2-year process, thereabouts. And I didn't make the plan. I just enforced it. He made the plan, said this is what we need to do to get where we need to get to be able to keep going and leverage up and all that sort of thing. Wasn't an easy conversation, obviously for him to have, but he, knew what I wanted to do, and to help me achieve what I needed to achieve. He said, "This is, if you want to do it, this is the nuts and bolts." So I think all up, it's cost me about 100 grand to do, but a lot of people probably look at it and go, "You spent 100,000 to do it," but to me, I'd made a lot more than that. So spending the 100,000 based on what I'd earned, what I could earn, nothing. Happy to spend it.
You've changed now into some structures that we went through in a couple episodes ago, allowing you, because you mentioned there, it doesn't matter what you earn, you'll get to a point, if they're in your personal name, that you hit a ceiling. From a lending perspective, Jared's touched on it in our structures podcast, and I don't want to speak for a mortgage broker because that's not my domain. Jared's the expert in the room here for that. But you do hit a ceiling, and then there are other options available to you that you can continue building wealth. You've just got to make sure you've got it structured in the right play, and that's what I was talking about with the team around you. If you don't have the right team, if you don't have the right education, it's very hard to continue building wealth down that avenue. I would imagine that there's probably a great accountant along the way that helps with these structures. You've got a great broker, no doubt, that helps get the deals across the line in terms of lenders and how that works. And you've got the expertise to go out and get properties that if this costs me X amount of dollars, the opportunity cost is far greater than, let's call it, the $100,000 that you needed to do, because you can make that back up and you can continue to build wealth, in your early 30s now. What's the investing journey look like for you, Blake, for the next 10 years? Jared, if you want to cut in and say, I've got a cracking strategy for everyone that wants to go and do this. I'm the best mortgage broker in Australia. Come and talk to me. Feel free.
This is general advice.
Yes, absolutely general advice. But what's the next 10 years look like for you, mate?
So this is probably the best question. So when the big fella sent it to me, I was like, I don't actually know. Like, I'm not that sort of person to have like goals. I don't really set goals. I find goals limiting in that regard. Like, I set a goal, in saying that, I wanted 10 before I was 30. Got there, that's stoked with that.
Amazing. It's probably in the top, 1%, if not 1% in Australia that gets the 10 before they're 30. It's a cracking job. I don't know if you ever look back. I don't know, country lads growing up in the country, you never pat yourself on the back. But amazing, mate.
Without looking up statistics, I think it'd probably be not necessarily the 1% under 30. It'd probably be in the 1-2% across all age brackets that owns 10 or more properties.
But see, for me, it's never been about that. Like it's good to hear it. It's nice to hear it, but to me, it's not about that. I set that goal for myself because I knew that once bit of bush maths for you, this one, right? This is how I worked it out when I eventually decided that I was going to go down this path. I thought to myself, okay, 10. Mind you, this maths was done in a laundromat in Parks, in Western New South Wales in the middle of summer, so I was probably a bit delirious as well. But I worked out that if I had 10 on average and they earned $300 a week rent and I owned them all, $3,000 a week, I went, I could live on that. So that's sort of where I got that from.
$3,000 a week. So it was an income more that you were tailoring towards an income.
Income. That's what it's about. What's going to pay your wage? Like, it's all good and well to have equity. And something that I sort of stand by. Growth isn't guaranteed. Whilst Australia, the property market average is like 6.2% on average growth. Growth isn't guaranteed. Everything goes up, everything goes down. It's that simple. It's how the cycle works. But income is guaranteed. Rent is guaranteed. If someone's in there, they are paying you every week. Like, it's guaranteed. So I thought to myself, okay, well, there's my wage. But as for the next 10 years, I think I'm lucky now, with the big fella. Sort of figured out what works for me, moving forward. I've been lucky that I've had a crack at a couple of different types of investing, the sweat equity, the smaller developments, larger developments, that sort of thing, the ones into twos with a duplex, the buying the land, putting the modular on it. I've tried a couple of different avenues. And after 10 years, I feel like I've nailed what works for me. So it's just really honing in on that and just ripping in. So, yeah, hopefully in the next sort of month, I'll buy another 2, split them, build duplexes, rinse and repeat, and just keep going. And who knows, there's no real goal. 10 years, whatever I end up with, might do a debt reduction, 10 years' time, 15 years' time. Might accumulate 20 or 30, sell 10, be debt free, and then I just keep doing it. I don't think I'll ever stop because it's just what I know now. It's in me. It's in me. It's part of me. So
It's a lot easier than driving trains over the long term.
I enjoy driving trains, but waking up at 2 in the morning, it gets old real quick. So yeah, it's just given me that freedom as well to pull the pin when I want to pull the pin. When I'm over it, I've really had enough. Then just do what I want to do. Really, yeah.
Yep. And it's probably no true statement around, the income's income. The growth's not guaranteed. We're going through some market volatility globally with the tariffs or impending tariffs, or however that goes with Donald Trump. So markets around the world, the valuations have, they're basically in free fall. Some markets down 20, 25%, talking about equity markets. But from an income point of view, as long as there's a tenant in there paying rent, you're always going to have that income. Even if the property value dropped of your portfolio, if it dropped 10, 20%, would you sell any?
No, I'd never sell. Oh, in saying that, no, I'm not going to sell. I'm not in a position where I'd have to force sell. I'm pretty lucky that everything covers itself. I think the market would have to go something crazy like 32%. I worked out before I'd even probably consider having to sell. But I think for me, the only time I'd ever sell would be to sort of pay down debt reduction or, pay off one to keep 2 and that sort of thing. But yeah, no, property's a long game, look short, play long.
It's nice to have a little cash buffer in there as well. So if this did go on for a period of time, exactly what you were saying before is that you've got the ability to maintain if there is any, little renovations you need to do, tenancy, vacant periods, things like that. With that little cash buffer, you've got the ability to do that relatively stress-free. Like you were saying before, if that's not there, that's when it puts people in a position they potentially have to force sell. So probably a really important part of being a property investor is that cash buffer to maintain that when markets are in free fall, you don't have to sell in a market that's in decline. You can hold and potentially pick up an opportunity or two. Absolutely. And then move on, and through a rising market, when you're getting into that debt reduction phase, sell and pay off multiple properties using those gains that you get from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the big one with that is what I would say is being able to carry that debt as well. If it did go south, being able to carry your debt is a big thing. That if you over leverage, you'll find that if you are contributing $100 a week now, it's been a really good market, really strong. If it takes even the slightest decline, your contributions could go from 100 a week to 300 to 400, and that's when you start putting strain on everything, like you said, marriages, things like that. Force sell, which you don't want, but if you do that over a portfolio of 3 or 4, then it could be catastrophic, and that doesn't just change your life sort of in the near future. It could be generational, like you just never know what it could do to you. So for me, I'm pretty open and pretty honest when I speak about it. I've always got about 40 or 50 grand, and I know that's a lot to some people. I haven't just accumulated that overnight. I've obviously saved, but that's generally speaking what I have got in my sort of emergency fund, you would say. If push ever come to shove and shit hit the fan, that's sort of what I'd have. I'm also about 8 grand in front in all of my rates. Like I keep paying them just because having that buffer makes me feel comfortable, puts me at ease.
It'd probably be easy when you're paying it weekly. You wouldn't notice if you're paying an extra $5 a week across 10 properties, and it accumulates at that rate, you're not going to notice it, compared to if you did want to pay that annually, that $8,000 extra, you'd probably feel the pinch at that point, you'd say.
Yeah, absolutely correct as well there. Yeah, it's just not having to worry about it. Like you don't see it; it just happens autonomously. It makes it. And I've got Xero structure, so like Xero, the software, accounting software, so it makes it easy.
Got a lot of structure.
Yeah, structure. Yeah, but the Xero software makes a massive difference as well. I know a lot of people think it's just for business, but if you do want to, or you do have a decent sized portfolio, a lot of people are the bigger ones than myself, but if you do want to sort of go down that avenue, that Xero structure also makes it easier from an accounting perspective as well come tax time. I think it costs $15 a month or something like that, but it changes the game because it'll save you at tax time as well. Accounting fees and costs and stuff like that. So just think little things like that. They make even the bad times make investing pleasant. And I think that's a big thing for people, is that people want that instant gratification, but it's more that being comfortable with it all. I think that it's probably a big thing, and sort of having that pleasant experience allows people to move forward. Whereas if you've had a negative one like yourself, you're not that sort of person, but some people might turn around and go, oh, I'm not doing that again. Like, that was shit show that. I'll just go spend it at the pub or something like that. Better investment.
You're not going to sleep well tonight, are you?
Mate, I'm fine with all of the decisions financially that I've ever made, mate. So it's only the way to get better. Mate, you've learned a lot along the way. Now transitioning into that you want to help people. You're a buyer's agent.
Yep.
You've niched down into what works for you, and you love helping people. So if you've got the knowledge and know-how and you like helping people, it's a natural fit for you to become a buyer's agent. Business buyer's agent, Blake, Huddleston Property. How do people get involved? And what is it actually that Huddleston Property delve into for clients?
Yeah, so Huddleston Property, Huddleston Property Group. Yeah, so for people that may or may not know, a buyer's agent represents the buyer in a property transaction or sale. So obviously your sales agent represents the seller or the vendor. The buyer's agent represents the buyer. So what we do is we offer like a turnkey solution. So everything from sourcing and acquisition to negotiation, dealing and liaising with all the sales agents, obviously identifying areas, everything like that. And even down to part of our what we offer, we'll even source things like your pest and building and organise that. Organising tenants, all that sort of thing, finding your property manager. But that's just part of our service. Some may or may not do that, but yeah, we like to do a turnkey solution from way to go, and pretty much just take the stress out of buying property. And then potentially, obviously, there's so much stuff out there, social media, and just sort of simplify it, break it all down, and try and help people as much as we can, and get people into good properties and good investments, and allow them to build wealth and build the future that they want.
A one-stop shop if you're looking for someone to partner with that can help hold your hand along the way, because there are plenty of mistakes, as we've all made, myself included.
Got to make mistakes to go forward.
Exactly. And if it's a nice way to put it. It's easy to get sidetracked with what's around at the moment in terms of education, and you never know what's true or correct out there, because there can be a lot, especially on social media and things like that. But there is a lot of good information out there as well that you can get, and it's great to partner with someone to learn from the experts. And I know that people, if they want to learn more around Huddleston Property, they should definitely reach out. But the next episode next week, Blake's going to talk us through an in-depth dive of around all things buyer's agents and what he looks for in the market. So thank you for tuning in to Your Wealth Playbook. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe, like. I know it's pretty hard. There's a couple of rough-looking heads on this podcast all the time with Jared and I. Blake, you've done us no favours there as well. But if you could drop a
best off listening on Spotify.
Best off listening on Spotify. It's radio, so if you're watching on YouTube, we apologise. But if you could leave us a comment, and reach out if you've got any questions. Blake will, a little teaser for next week's episode is we're going to run through all things around a buyer's agent, what they look for in property. So tune into that one.